Hey everyone, before we start this course, I just wanted to say a few quick things. One, I originally created this with the intention of selling it as a course online, and I decided to give it out for free. And I'm not asking for anything in returns by any means. There's no expectation here. We are going to offer this on Gumroad with a name your price option and a Patreon if you do find value. But if you don't have the means to pay for this, use this 100% for free. And our only ask is that you just pay it forward. So as you land your first tech sales job, if there's friends, family, people in your network, etc., that you can help, whether it's referring them to this video in the future or helping them one-on-one based on your own experience, just pay it forward, and I hope you find a lot of value in this course. So really appreciate it. It's an end-to-end guide on how to iterate on an existing resume to modify it for tech sales or create one completely from scratch. First and foremost, thanks for taking part in this course. As we've created it, we're going to walk through step by step either how to create a resume or how to take your existing experience and map that onto a tech sales ready resume. Now, that being said, I do want to say a few things before we start this course because I've seen it play out time and time again. We can sit here and we can do this casually and you can do 10 minutes at a time, and what I am 100% recommending is that right now, if you have a lot of time to dedicate to this, we can work through this entire course by turning off all of our notifications, turning off all of our extra tabs, making this the sole focus on our computer and working through it. You will get so much more done and your quality of work will be substantially better if you focus a dedicated hour or two to this at a time. You'll get through it much faster and the quality of your resume is going to be substantially better. So with that being said, I appreciate your focus, and if we need to pick up at another time, that's fine. But when you're ready, let's begin and let's knock out a really powerful resume. Thanks. I also want to briefly set the stage of my own career. I was an engineer before going into tech sales. I actually took a year off. I used to be a competitive athlete as well and competed overseas. When I came back, I had a gap year and I had to take all of my engineering experience and modify that to tech sales. From that, I was able to get numerous different interviews and I learned a lot of things along the way. Now, as a co-founder of a tech sales recruiting company, I've helped tons of people either make the next move in their career or make a transition from a non-sales career to sales. So while I'm not the world's best expert, I'm not here to toot my own horn. I will say I've seen a lot, and if there's anything that you get from this course, it's the way of thinking about a tech sales resume. I'm not going to be able to tell you directly, hey, this is the exact thing you should write, but the frameworks that we're going to use to evaluate your past experience and map that onto a tech sales resume that makes it intriguing for a manager, for a recruiter, for whatever it may be, that's the framework that we're after. Thinking and putting everything in the context of tech sales, both resume, both LinkedIn, etc. So as we get started, I want to make one more reminder. Now is the time to turn off all notifications. Let's block maybe an hour of this at a time, at a minimum, and let's make the browser in your computer the only tab that's open. No other tabs, no other notifications, no music in the background, etc. Now, that being said, I've seen thousands of resumes, etc. Okay? So there's a few key distinctions before we even worry about taking the template that's provided in this course or taking our existing resume and already making modifications. We need to understand two critical things in my mind, which is one, the resume is a launch pad for conversations in our interview. We're trying to create interest, and all of the points that we have on our resume are going to speak to broader stories that we can talk about in the interview process. And this is something we're going to get into in a much further detail throughout the course. But as an example, if I was an engineer and I discovered something or a deficiency in a software execution time, and I made some modification to the code which resulted in 20% decrease of execution time, which led to an increase in customer satisfaction or revenue generated by the company. These are things that I'm putting in the resume that I can talk about further in the interview. So even right now, if we want to take a brief moment to pause, do you have an existing resume or is this the first time you're creating one? Let's think about our past experience and some of the strongest stories that you remember, whether it's like a week in particular where you had a difficult customer you dealt with, whether it's, I don't know, if you're coming from an analytical finance background, did you uncover something that you can tie directly to revenue? And let's just briefly get in our minds thinking about maybe a compelling story or two that we will then break down further and make a very strong, powerful statement on the resume. I might add, if you're coming from a sales career that's not tech sales and making that transition, Of course, now would be a great time to talk about if you overachieved quota, won different awards, etc. But again, the purpose of this exercise is to write down, yes, that as an achievement, but more beyond that. What were the things you did that helped you overattain on quota? Was there anything unique or novel that you took to your approach that made you succeed at a high level, etc.? These are the types of things we can put down on paper, and we'll drill down and make it more condensed as we go throughout this course. Now, the other thing that's really important to consider, and I think understand before we even start putting things on paper and actually writing our resume down, is what do tech salespeople care about? What do managers care about? What do recruiters want to see? And I kind of started to give examples through the storytelling method of, hey, what were things that impacted revenue? But even as a manager in tech sales, one of the things that I am evaluated on by my superiors, whether it's the chief revenue officer, whether it's the CEO of the company, is the amount of money we're generating. But more specifically, that's being evaluated against time. So there's going to be common terms that ideally, if you can tie your past experience to these terms, are going to help. But at a minimum, knowing what sales managers are thinking about is going to allow us to take past experience and package it in a way that makes them realize that even if we're coming from a different career, we're coming from maybe a different industry, we are already thinking the way that they are in terms of how our work is directly impacting revenue in a way that they are evaluated on. So there's a few key terms I want to talk about, and there's many more that you can find, but I think just restating, this is not particularly novel, it's not mind-blowing, but common terms you'll see when you get into tech sales are MRR and ARR as an example, which are monthly recurring revenue and annual recurring revenue. So usually if you're selling a technical product that's being bought on a licensed or software-based model where they're being charged monthly, they're being charged annually, etc. And these are the metrics that startups in particular are trying to grow, and companies as a whole, I might add. But in tech, that's usually the largest, I would say, highest level metric that they are evaluated against is growing that monthly recurring revenue and growing that annual recurring revenue. Now, within this, there's two things that we want to look at, and maybe depending on the job opening or depending on the manager you're speaking with and the type of account management role that you're looking into, we're going to tailor that accordingly. And what I mean is there are multiple ways to grow monthly recurring revenue or grow annual recurring revenue, which namely is expanding within an existing account. So let's say, I don't know, AT&T was your customer. You can increase ARR by expanding how much of the software at AT&T they are using, but also, and equally important, depending on the function that you're going into, the department that you're applying to, is what is called new logos or acquiring new companies. Again, it sounds fancy. It's literally just saying you got a customer that has never used your product before to sign up and buy your product. But again, depending on the management, depending on the team that you're applying to, they may put more emphasis on trying to grow existing accounts, and that's going to be in the job description, or they may put more emphasis on trying to acquire new logos, particularly if they're a young startup. So all that to say, now that we kind of have a broader view of what management is looking for in terms of growing monthly recurring revenue, growing annual recurring revenue, and even one more I'll throw in there is decreasing churn, or people who maybe used the software for a year, decided it wasn't a good fit and churned or stopped using it and are no longer a customer. These are kind of some key metrics that management is looking at in tech sales. So now, if we have past sales experience, do you have examples of how you grew within an account or acquired a new logo that maybe previously had no idea of the thing that you were selling or whatever it may be? If you're selling door to door, if you're selling solar, did you sign up, 20 new clients a month? Are there things like that that you can speak to? Also on the flip side, maybe you're coming from a more analytical background, data analyst, customer success types of roles. Were there things that you did that improved the customer experience and made them continue to grow their usage of the product that you were supporting or building? If you're coming from software engineering, same thing there as well. Did you create a feature that generated a lot of interest from outside customers who were not previously customers of your software? And again, these are the types of frameworks we want to start to think with when we're composing a tech sales resume. I want to take a brief moment to pause here and let's collect our thoughts. One, a quick recap of what we've talked about thus far, which is your resume is a launch pad for stories of very powerful moments in your career. Do Do you have an example, even if it's not even in a work context? Maybe you're just out of school, you are a part of a club at college, and you got people to volunteer their time. Are there stories of where you made a broader impact beyond yourself in the case of not having work experience? Or if you were in a work environment that was maybe not directly sales, were there things that you did that you can tie back to revenue increases for the company? Were there things that you did that improved processes, even if you're an engineer and maybe you can't map it directly to revenue? Did you do something that made everyone's life easier by a quantifiable amount? As an example, you improved a process by 20%, maybe reducing the headcount required to maintain something, etc. Now, if you're in door-to-door sales or a different type of sales than tech sales, can you quantify the types of new customers you added? Can you quantify how much you grew existing accounts to make them strategic long-term accounts for the company, etc.? So let's take a moment, and again, there's no right answer here, and before we even worry about writing down a specific thing on our resume or trying to have our final draft ready right now, let's think back on all of our work experience and maybe highlight a few different stories. Get it all out there, whether you even want to record your voice or just start typing long form in paragraphs about what happened. Let's get that down. Let's write a few major, maybe if you have a couple different jobs in the past, maybe 3 key examples of each different work experience. And if you can speak to the quantifiable results, whether that's revenue, whether that's process improvement, whether that's reducing headcount, whether that's increasing customer satisfaction, those are all great things. But also the qualitative. Were there decision makers that you had to speak to? Did you have to get buy-in from your manager, director, CEO, etc.? And what this is going to help us do is keep thinking in these frameworks that we've started to understand. And as we go further, we're going to chisel this down into really great, strong, compelling sentences that then when we're in the interview, take us to these longer form stories that we've already typed out and we've already prepared. So let's pause here. Let's take maybe 5 to 10 minutes and just pause the video. We'll start again, once this video is done, we'll pick back up where we were. Good luck. All right, welcome back, and glad we took a quick break. Again, a quick reminder, let's turn off all notifications. Let's turn off all other browser tabs that we may have opened during this break, which is totally fine. But now let's refocus in and get back to the resume. I'm curious with everyone that took a break, how was writing that down? I often find when I'm doing this for the first time or I haven't written a resume in a long time, I'm like overly analytical, overcritical, and I don't let myself just get it out on paper. It's great that you've gotten this far and you've already started to write these things down. And again, this doesn't have to be the final version. We're going to keep iterating throughout this process to make it even better. But I even want to take just a brief moment to talk about my own experience when I graduated college and also when I transitioned to tech sales. And then even when I transitioned from an existing sales company to another one and got a substantial promotion. I want to walk through what that looked like and how I use my past experience tailored to that. And my hope is that, again, even if you're just out of school and maybe you've only worked at like Chipotle, that's totally fine. We can tie that experience to tech sales. So hopefully using examples from my own career, it can help you take what you've written down now and maybe think about it even further, comb through it, iterate on it, make it even that much more impactful. So when I graduated college, I studied a field that was effectively electrical engineering, and I applied at tons of different companies, and I had some past co-op and internship experience in the field, but I had also worked at Chipotle in college. So, I was even able to use that to speak to these broader job opportunities. And so one of the things I would say is even if you have some experience that's maybe completely unrelated, I've worked with former managers of restaurants that are now in tech sales. So there's nothing that's out of bounds here. And it's important to just, with those frameworks in mind of annual recurring revenue, customer churn, monthly recurring revenue, getting new logos, or growing existing accounts, we can take that framework and apply that to past experience. So for instance, when I was graduating college, yes, I had some internships. I even was not shy to put Chipotle underneath that in terms of my work experience because the team that I worked with was actually the fastest in the Southeast by number of orders fulfilled per hour. And I know that might sound trivial, but yes, I can speak to all the engineering experience I've had in the past, but I'm also showing excellence or a high level of achievement in different domains across my entire career. So again, this may or may not apply, and I'm not saying like if you worked a temp job in the summer 10 years ago that you put it on there, but don't shy away from relevant experience, particularly if you're a new grad or particularly if you're changing into tech sales from a different industry altogether. Again, we can use these stories, and I kid you not, I applied for an engineering sales role out of college, ultimately went the engineering route up front, but I actually had a guy in my interview, he's like, I see here you were on the fastest crew in the Southeast at Chipotle. Like, how was that? And like, we had a fun, nice, relaxed conversation, but I was still able to like jokingly say like, no, seriously, like I'm the fastest burrito roller in the Southeast, right? These are kinds of things that we shouldn't shy away from. We don't need to be ashamed of, and we can tie to that relevant experience. Now, as we get more and more tech sales focused, again, that was more of a new grad example. When I went from engineering to tech sales, I took a year off and I played sports overseas. And that's a separate story in of itself, but I had basically a gap year that I kind of felt I needed to explain or I don't know, was kind of worried about when I first got into these interviews. But the reality is, it was just a matter of reformatting my past engineering experience to fit tech sales in the way that I impacted customers, in the way that I impacted revenue, etc. And it really wasn't a huge deal, especially if you're coming from an analytical background or you have past sales experience. Like, that's great. But if you can already show that you're thinking about tech sales roles specifically, you've done research to apply your experience to that resume, it's going to be that much more exciting to a manager and who wants to now interview you. And again, I'm going to beat this like a dead horse, but again, we've created that interest in the resume because we've communicated in our resume with these strong statements that we're already thinking in terms of revenue, we're already thinking in terms of things that matter to a tech sales manager. And now, because we've already written this down, we've got these great stories prepared that we can talk about when we're in the interview and they ask us about, well, tell me about this, well, tell me about this. And it all continues to compound on itself. So all that to say, when I transitioned from engineering to tech sales, a lot of what I did in engineering was customer facing. So what that allowed me to do is there were numerous times where one, I would work with a client that was using technology from the company that I worked at, but they were maybe doing something very inefficiently, or they would talk to me like, yes, I have this problem right now. And I was just curious, since you're a tech guy, like if we wanted to do this in the future, how would we do that? When I heard things like that from end users, I would contact our sales department and say, hey, just so you know, this customer is thinking about doing X, Y, and Z, and I think they could accomplish that at a minimum with these different tools or software, whatever it may be. But I was able to create sales opportunities through those technical interactions with the end user. So one of the things that was very compelling on my resume when I was making that transition into tech sales is I had a statement to the effect of generated over $200,000 worth of sales pipeline through technical support interactions. So, and again, we've talked about this already, but if you're coming from a different career like data analytics, finance, economics, or something totally different, even, in the example I mentioned with like restaurants, were there things that you did that directly generated, even if it wasn't closed business or direct dollars in hand, did you create pipeline? Did you create more opportunity for the sales team, for the marketing team, for the end users? Did you create tools that led to an improvement in efficiency and processes, etc.? And before we pause, one other thing I want to add is obviously I feel like this is implied, but if you've won any awards, you've done anything notable that was, I guess, called out or celebrated by the company, etc., obviously those are things we can include that are quantifiable results. We don't have to tie every little thing back to revenue, and that's just one component of the quantitative aspect of our resume that we want. But also now we're going to transition after we kind of hone in and reiterate and get all of these quantifiable results down. Now we're going to change our focus to more of the qualitative side and the statements that we can make there. And after that, we'll actually start putting lines on our resume, actually start putting things in our LinkedIn and get this more finalized and really polished off. Now that we're coming up on this pause, feel free to hop down in the description and grab a copy of my resume, which I've linked below. And again, not that we're going to copy paste. I don't want us writing actual resume lines down now, but you've done a great job writing out stories of your past experience thus far. And I've talked a little bit about my past experience. Take a look at my full resume and see the types of ways that I'm quantifying and also qualitatively speaking to my past experience. So if there's any gaps left in the way that you're writing out your past experience, maybe you can get a little inspiration in the way that I've tied revenue or quantifiable outcomes to my past experience. You can now chisel down one last time in your own and get those quantifiable results that in the next section, we're actually going to start putting into the resume itself. So let's take a quick moment to pause, maybe another 5 to 10 minutes. Again, are there any awards that you have? Are there things based on what we've written down thus far? Are there things maybe now that you're thinking about it more, some of the high level things that you wrote down, can you get more specific? Were there things that tied to revenue outcomes, customer satisfaction, whatever it may be? Let's iterate one more time and see if there's things that we can tie to quantifiable results and broader conversations when we're in that interview setting. All right, now that we're back, we've made a ton of progress and we have a lot of the heavy lifting out of the way. Again, the beauty of writing this down long form, not trying to format it specifically right out of the gate, is that yes, we're gonna distill and throw away a lot of this information on the resume itself, but we've got the surrounding story that you've already built out in your mind around the point that we're gonna drill down to. So yes, in terms of the exact resume, what we wrote down, 90% of it is going to be thrown out. But when we get to that resume, we're already thinking about the broader picture of this statement itself. We can take our interviewer through a broader story about these quantitative results that we've gotten to. And now we're going to transition along the same lines, but talking more about the qualitative aspects of these experiences. So where previously we were looking into the quantitative results, the customer satisfaction, the revenue generated, the number of sales in a different industry, et cetera, et cetera. Now we want to take those, and whether it's that story specifically or maybe another story we can speak to, we're going to talk more about the qualitative aspects of your past experience. So this could include things like interacting with, let's say in the case that you're graduating college, interacting with the dean of your school, the president of the university, interacting with parents of a club you were part of while you were fundraising, interacting with other students, getting them bought into volunteering time, etc. These are more the qualitative things that we want to express, I would say, below the quantitative results. So at this point, you've looked at my resume. You've seen, for instance, how I start with the quantitative results. So I was fortunate to win an award. I also exceeded quota. I had a bunch of different distinguished awards, etc. at my past job. I'm going to lead with those out of the gate because those are some of my strongest points when I'm communicating to another sales organization. As I go further below that, I'm starting to bring in more qualitative aspects, whether it's names of public-facing customers that I have or things that I've done that have improved customer retention, improved spend within an account, etc. So in your case, now let's take these stories, and also maybe there's others that come to mind. What are things that we've done that are more qualitative, like talking to influential people, getting buy-in or dollars moved from parents to fundraise for an organization? Have you been able to make an impact that's maybe not quite quantifiable, but was a result of very high quality work that you did, whether it's personally or interacting with other types of people? And again, I'm going to break this down for the sake of example of the numerous different backgrounds that we interact with. But let's say you're coming from a tech background. Yes, you've done a great job quantifying the results of some of the customer facing interactions you've had in the past. But have there been initiatives, maybe you're in a really hardcore software engineering role and you haven't had a ton of customer facing experience. Have you had to get buy-in from your manager, from a product manager, from a project lead, etc., to maybe change direction of the product roadmap or ask to implement a new feature or make a revision or harden the product, etc.? Maybe you're coming from real estate. Were there influential networks of people that you had to break into to even have the opportunity to sell for a neighborhood or a development? And again, real estate is totally out of my domain of competency, so don't hold me to the fire there. But again, maybe we were door-to-door sales. I mean, yes, it's great that we sold 20 new homes a month, etc. But same thing, were there people within the door-to-door organization that you had to network with to gain their trust, to get a bigger territory? Were there neighborhoods, again, that you had to build trust in to even be able to sell in that neighborhood in the first place? Are there other types of experience that aren't quite quantitative that we can put under those quantitative results that show that you have influence? You've driven change within an organization and you've networked with a broader group of people to achieve an outcome that's larger than something you can just do yourself. Let's start thinking in that regard, and let's take another quick break to maybe write more of the qualitative things like, again, I'm just beating a dead horse here. Did you speak to anyone influential? Did you drive change, maybe even if it didn't have to impact revenue or customer acquisition, etc.? I mentioned in the software engineering example, maybe you're coming from a marketing background. Did you course correct a campaign that was not getting any results, make a change, and you see substantially higher interaction with your ads, with the marketing campaign, etc.? Were you a teacher? Did you have to raise money for different supplies or get parents to donate books or whatever it may be, right? There's no right answer here, and the reason I'm throwing so many examples is so, especially this early on, we're not overly critical or analytical of saying this isn't going to work, this isn't relevant. Just get it all down on paper, and then we'll distill from there, and after this section, we're actually going to start putting lines in our resume. So very quickly, let's take another maybe 10-minute break. Let's think about qualitative examples of our resume, of our past experience that we're going to incorporate, and we will collect back and actually start putting lines on our resume. Once the resume is complete, we're going to transition that into LinkedIn. All right, so now we've gotten everything written down, both quantitative and qualitative, and we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Now we're actually going to make our resume using either the existing template that we have in the description below in the video, or you can use a template of your own. But the point remains, we want to lead with the quantitative information and then follow with any qualitative information to maybe fill the gaps. But again, at no time, at any point, regardless of your experience, are we going to exceed 1 page. So if you have more experience, if you're later in your career, you've had so much experience that it goes beyond a page, all I want you to do is trim it down to a single page. And if we have to leave some way older jobs behind, at least on the resume, that's totally fine. Let's just put it down in 1 page and maybe have anywhere from 3 to 5 relevant bullets of any given job or experience. All right, everyone. I know we've had a chance to look at my resume now, but as you start composing yours together using the templates that we have in the description of this video or otherwise, I want to walk through how I structured mine and just, again, reiterate a lot of the points that we talked about. One of the things that we haven't really talked about yet, and we will in greater detail, is an objective statement. This is something we're also going to reuse or slightly alter on LinkedIn. So I'll briefly touch on it now, and we'll get in more detail here shortly. But in this case, this resume is what I use to get an enterprise account executive role. I ultimately changed positions, and my current job is actually not on this listing right now. But that being said, even going back to my previous experience as an SDR, I have some of my engineering experience on here as well. It hits on a lot of the things that we talked about, and it makes this very streamlined and easily readable and understandable by someone in sales. So for instance, obviously, again, objective statement, I'm quickly touching on my background. Maybe if you're transitioning into sales for the first time, you could quickly make a statement that's no more than 2 lines talking about, hey, I'm a successful teacher looking to transition into technical sales, something of that nature. But you can see here, again, I make a point to call out my technical background and experience selling cloud database solutions because the roles I was looking for were at highly technical companies that usually like to have, even in their sales roles, people with technical aptitude. Now, again, education, just throwing it out there, the school that I went to, in my case, my GPA was pretty solid, so I put it there, especially for an engineering degree. Now, as we get into the related experience at the previous company that I worked at, again, because I was in a situation where I was fortunate to win an award and actually be a top performer, that's the first thing that I'm going to lead with. Here's this quantifiable result. I won 2021 President's Club, and I was the global #1 seller of our cloud product. Again, in this situation, it was unique because I moved to this mid-market role, and I had only been there for, less than a year. So I didn't necessarily have a ton here that I could drill into, but we'll see in my previous role as well how I talk about that further. So I didn't have much different than when I was a previous account executive at this company as well before I got that promotion. So I kind of quickly led to more of the qualitative stuff here where it shows that my duty was to grow existing accounts and source new business. But again, because I've already stated that I was a President's Club winner and global #1 seller, they're not too concerned after that, candidly, at least most. Like that will come up in an interview and I'll talk about it further, but I'm just hitting on the fact that I'm growing existing accounts and sourcing new business. So I have the ability as a seller to go both routes. If we think back to really early in on this video where I was talking about those 2 different types of sales and revenue, where we're going after new logos or growing existing accounts. Now, again, I'm speaking to here as well because in my case in particular, I'm in the startup world or even just going into sales in general. Like I mentioned, teachers, real estate, whatever. Are there public presentations that you've given? This is more of a qualitative thing here where I had some success selling our cloud product. So I actually ended up leading over 3 different company-wide sales enablement sessions detailing our broader strategies. But again, what this does is when I get into an interview, they're like, oh, wow, what is your strategy? And now, because I've given these talks, I'm not making this up. Like I can talk all about the strategy that I developed to sell our cloud product, which is a brand new product on the market that I found success with. So again, We're going from that quantitative more to the qualitative, and we see the structure again and again. When I was a lower level account executive there, I was also a President's Club award winner and the global #1 in SkySQL sales. I also led one half of the year in quota attainment company-wide. And again, here's still more relevant quantitative information where I increased that annual recurring revenue because that's such a common term in tech sales. They appreciate that. That shows that I'm familiar with the environment. I'm thinking in those terms. I grew existing accounts by an average of 20%, which is great because again, I'm showing that flexibility to go both ways. And if you don't have that experience, that's okay. But if you're in sales already, you're trying to make that move, you can speak to the ways that you're trying to acquire new customers and or grow existing accounts. Now, lastly, a lot of the things, I've always worked on cloud tools. So as we get past the quantitative results, we get more in the qualitative results here, showing that I worked with Google Cloud, with AWS, because a lot of cloud products now are sold in a partner fashion, which is a conversation outside the scope of this. But I'm showing collaboration with different teams, with different tech leaders of Google, of Amazon, et cetera, and what that took to close different deals. And I have stories about the ways that I interacted with those companies. And again, I'm beating a dead horse at this point. Hopefully you're starting to get a gist of how you can structure your resume. But even, again, this is more qualitative. But I actually I have public facing clients of mine that I won business in and are now public references for the company that I worked at. So this is how I'm breaking it down. I've got these quantitative, very powerful, impactful results that I can put immediately, but more qualitatively, I'm shedding light on what I did in sales as a whole. Even as we go to SDR, again, I was fortunate to be in a situation where I exceeded quota. I also got promoted in 3.5 months, which is the fastest in company history. So again, those are stories I can talk to, but you're starting to pick up the idea. But again, here, I have relevant experience from my past athletic career and relevant experience from my past engineering career, where I used to play a sport for Team USA called team handball. It's a lesser known sport, but it was a really cool opportunity to play sports around the world. And even though this is sports, this isn't even business. This isn't a for-profit business. I'm talking about how many countries I got to play in. It's not to be braggadocious or anything of that nature, but it's very quantifiable because who knows, if I said I played for USA Team Handball, maybe I played in one scrimmage and that was it. But here I showed that I had the opportunity to play in 8 different countries. It was clearly a significant part of my life. You can see 7 years of experience in this role. But also talking about the different types of venues that I had to play that are talking again to the relevant success that I had within that role. I got a chance to play in a world championship and I played scrimmages and matches against different teams in Europe. Very cool experience. But again, it's still following that framework. It's a quantified result here. Now, again, I talk about another quantifiable result that I'm particularly proud of. We beat Cuba for the first time in 32 years in one of the last tournaments that I ever played in. And also, again, more qualitatively, while I debate putting this on sometimes, I just use this as an example. Like for me, I worked full-time as an engineer and played sports largely full-time throughout this entire period. So while again, I use this more to show the work ethic here and create that story of in this interview, they're like, wow, you played handball and we're a full-time employee at the same time. And that's another story, if it even comes up, that I can talk about, right? But it's important to me. It's something that I think is worth knowing when I'm going into these different interviews. Like I sacrificed a very substantial chunk of time of my life, a good fair amount of years to make that happen, right? Anyway, I digress. I'm getting off point. The point being that it's following the same structure: quantitative, qualitative. National Instruments, a big engineering company in the test engineering hardware and software space. This was my first job out of school. And again, I'm talking about that qualitative result that I'm now tying to sales as well. And I talked about this earlier in the video where we had technical support interactions. And I was able to use these to say, hey, you're actually experiencing this problem and this product may fit that. Could I engage our sales team? And so here I'm talking about how, one, I provided mission critical technical support to key accounts. So some of the top accounts at our company, I was supporting them from a technical standpoint. And this is a multi-billion-dollar company. So that should be a powerful statement to the right person that's reading this. But again, I'm taking that engineering experience and saying, hey, I also discovered over $200,000 worth of opportunities. So I'm taking both of those and I'm quantifying that impact that I had. And this is kind of a combo here, which is qualitative and quantitative. But I actually taught a lot of our technical hardware and software products to different end users at prominent institutions, including Northrop Grumman and Cornell. So what this is doing is saying, hey, I not only taught a substantial amount of time, but also from a qualitative standpoint, I taught at notable organizations like one of the biggest defense contractors in the United States, as well as a prominent university at Cornell. So again, I'm using my example, and this has been iterated over many, many years. So,
I've seen people with completely different formats that still follow that quantitative versus qualitative, but I say format in terms of graphically how they represent this information. But this is a great starting point. And you see, I'm just doing the exact same thing. I'm even reiterating here quantitatively. Hey, I had sales enablement through product knowledge. I also am known for technical communication because I'm applying for very technical sales roles. And again, sales and marketing messaging. A lot of what I did in my early role was creating the initial messaging around a brand new product in the first place. And because I was applying to a startup that was bringing a new product to market, that was very important to me to say, hey, I have been on the ground developing messaging directly for a brand new product on the market, which is exactly why you're interviewing me in the first place. And again, just talking here more about different achievements and involvements. These are things that you can change in and out. Maybe there's volunteering that you want to talk about. You can change the header here to something relevant, or maybe with your past experience and skills, that's enough. You don't have to do that. I'm more or less here kind of filling the full page. It's a nice condensed page. It's got very dense information, but also if I'm a sales manager, I'm coming in here and I'm seeing all of these relevant points. Company, title, okay, wow, President's Club, global #1. Title, President's Club, global #1. That at least at a minimum has my attention, right? And then again, we work our way down to these, like I've caught their attention here. We work down to these more quantitative, qualitative things. And at a minimum, we've got our foot in the door for a first interview. So I hope that helped. And I know we've probably been looking at this, but I'm hoping that a step-by-step walkthrough of this, again, helps crystallize in your mind how you're structuring your resume as well.
All right, the nice thing is, now that we have our resume completely done, we have almost all the heavy lifting out of the way. The LinkedIn is going to be an extension of the resume. We're basically going to condense the resume further and or literally just copy paste it over. I'm gonna walk through my LinkedIn and kind of show you a little bit more, but I wanna hit on two quick things before we do that, which is both the LinkedIn About section and the LinkedIn Title section. In the About section, if you don't want employers to know that you're looking, I wouldn't recommend changing it from your day to day. It's fine to have it as is. I'm more concerned, and really anyone that's looking from a recruiting standpoint, I've never seen anyone really pause and like read the About section. If anything, it can do more harm than good. So short and sweet there. If you're in a different job and you don't want people to know, I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't even talk about the fact that you're looking for whatever kind of job, right? If you are in a situation where maybe you're like a teacher or a real estate agent looking to break into tech sales and you feel comfortable putting that in there, short and sweet is better than almost anything else you can come up with. It's not the time to try and be super funny, any of that stuff. You could just say something as simple as real estate professional breaking into SaaS sales. Like literally that simple. The only other thing I'd say is title wise, same exact rule. So if you don't want people to know that you're looking for a different job, feel free to keep it as is. But also you are not doing yourself any favors. And this is a very small percentage of you that might actually do this. But the people that are putting like entrepreneur, innovator, part-time guitar player, all this stuff, we're cutting it out. Okay. And like, literally just put your job title. If you're unemployed right now, looking for work, you could even put like seeking entry-level role in tech sales or something like that. But don't try and be creative. Don't put entrepreneur / podcaster / all that stuff. I mean, there may be one-off examples of people who have put things that are really creative, but if you think that's getting more attention to your profile in a good way, if you're looking at a serious tech sales position, I doubt that would work in your favor. So feel free to disagree with me on that one. I'd leave that open-ended and never say never. Maybe look at the internet for opinions. But again, especially on the non-work experience stuff here in the About section and in your title overview, the only thing that managers are even looking at is really just scrolling almost immediately down to your work experience, which we've already crystallized. We've already made super crisp, super fresh in the resume. So we're pretty much good to go. And we're going to walk through my resume just to look at it a little bit further and crystallize these concepts. All right, everyone. Here's my LinkedIn profile. And again, the beauty, now that we've talked about the objective statement, is how we can tie this into an About section on your LinkedIn. Now, again, what I am doing here in the About section, and I wouldn't overthink this isn't a huge, critically important part. On LinkedIn, honestly, what most managers are doing is saying, hey, here's your profile, and I just want to see your experience right away. I'm just going straight down to that. That's really all I care about. Your About statement is not going to make that powerful of an impression on me. If anything, it could do damage. So again, I might add that this is probably the longest it's ever been. You could have a short and sweet statement like, hey, I'm
successful teacher looking to transition into tech sales, or real estate professional with proven track record of success looking to transition into tech sales. Like, very simple, short and sweet is more than fine here. And I'm just saying, in my case here in the about, I'm summarizing my experience, the things that are important to me. For me, because I'm not looking right now, but I still want to have this just polished and ready in the case that anything happens, which I don't expect. I'm not making any drastic changes anytime soon. Very happy where I'm at. But that being said, what I like to do, this just keeps it fresh, right? Because anytime if I had to make a change for whatever reason, if I decided to take time off and come back, this is still polished and very relevant to the experience that I've had to date. So in my case, again, very short and sweet here on the about. Something very simple. Less is more here. You can do more damage by saying things like passionate real estate salesperson with sales aptitude and drive and all that shit that doesn't matter. Excuse the language. But like, here again, it's a quick summary of my experience. I think the important things to me, I love working at startups. I do not enjoy working at large corporations at this time in my life. And I think I've been very proud to, and it's a cool thing for me that I've been on the ground floor for 2 Kubernetes native products going to market. So I brought 2 new technologies to market. Anyway, I digress. The point being, short and sweet here, something that's nice, easy, summarizes your experience to date. But same thing here. Like, I'm in sales. I just use this here to talk about the technology that I sell and not say, hey, I'm a salesperson when I connect with technical people. But like in your case, don't put 10 titles like real estate agent / part-time chef / amateur guitar player / entrepreneur. Please don't do that. Keep it really simple. Like, if you're a real estate agent, hey, just like real estate agent at Keller Williams. Or if you're a teacher, like 5th grade teacher at BAM. Like, please, I mean, hey, so someone may disagree with me, right? And never say never. And I shouldn't be so opinionated, but candidly, I am. Like, if you're putting 8 million different things here, like part-time podcaster and entrepreneur and innovator and people pleaser and all this, like, at least for me, I'm not going to look at it. So keep it straightforward and simple, really nice and easy. Same thing here, nice and easy about what are you looking to do? Where are you coming from? Nice and easy because you're looking for a job. So again, as we come down, I'm going to breeze through and breeze over my current employer. Even with Gucci, this is something I do on the side of my day job, something I very much enjoy, but I keep it minimal here. This isn't the best example because I try to minimize this on my LinkedIn profile, something I more do offline or not as public, because I am fully employed right now as an enterprise account executive. Now, I mentioned earlier, the beauty of having the resume done in the format that we've done is, you see what I've done here is either literally copy pasted lines from my resume. I keep it even shorter in LinkedIn on purpose. Some people may differ. I don't necessarily have a preference there, but again, are you putting actual relevant things? If you have 4 to 5 to 10 relevant, very cool, impressive things here, by all means, add them. But for me, I like to keep it more minimal. That's a preference. That's not the right answer. And so again, we see the exact same thing from my resume. Here, I'm condensing the go-to-market strategy, leading global sales enablement sessions, etc. And again, copy paste from the resume. I condensed this statement because I'm not looking for employment. If there were, for any reason that I don't anticipate right now, a reason I needed to look for a new job or whatever it may be, I might go as in depth as my resume. But the beauty is I haven't done any extra work here. I simply laid it out exactly like my resume, and it's clean cut, it's copy paste, it's very easily reusable. And at this point, your LinkedIn should be the easiest thing to do by far. If anything, the longest thing to do is going to be setting it up if you don't have a LinkedIn in place, or just scraping all the stuff that you have in the past and making it look very clean, efficient, and quantified and qualitative. Same thing here, handball. You can also add these links. I think this is a nice touch. This is a personal preference. Maybe if you're a software engineer and you have a development portfolio, you might actually link to that portfolio. In this example, it just links to my player bio. There's an old link, and I won't even go to it for the sake of this example. But the point being, if you have one thing that's relevant, I wouldn't blow it up with tons of different links. But maybe you have, like if you're a real estate agent, you have an example or maybe an online of your portfolio of properties you've sold, or any type of relevant project or a thing that is worth putting in a professional context, you can link it in here. And again, this is literally the exact same thing that we see here. I flipped the order. I think I just made this at a different time, but it's the exact 2 points that we saw on my resume. I just said F500 here being Fortune 500 accounts, taught 300 plus hours of software and hardware courses on site, enabled 200K of upsells through technical support, mapping existing problems to NI solutions. So the beauty is, now that we're here, this takes the least amount of time. The heavy lifting is done. The resume's in place. Your LinkedIn is now in place. And literally all it just takes is some optimization, copy pasting things, making sure it's polished, it looks nice, it flows smooth, and we are effectively done. So we'll recap here, but you should be good to go. just take some time to knock this out and we are all set.
All right, I want to take a moment to pause and thank you if you've made it this far. A few things to recap, and again, looking forward now as well. So one, we've talked about the resume structure with the quantitative first, the qualitative second. We've done a great job distilling all of these great stories into these things to the resume and LinkedIn. But the beauty is now that we've written all of these down, we've written these stories out, or even if you didn't write it fully out, we've started to think about it. We've got all these stories built around the points that we put on our resume. So even though the specific interview tactics will be in future content and future videos that we're releasing, the beauty is, even though we don't have a specific course on that ready, you have already got these stories ready to go, pre-cut, pre-packaged for interviews. And obviously, you don't want to sound like a robot and just rehearsing something that you've practiced over and over again, but it gets your mind going. It gets you thinking about these different situations. It gets you thinking in terms of what sales management wants, which is clearly showing impact in a qualitative way and clearly showing results in a quantitative way. So again, if you've made it this far, we really appreciate it. And again, 100% optional. If you'd like to contribute, if you found a lot of value in this course, we do have a Patreon and also a Gumroad name your price option, but 100% optional. Also, would love your feedback. If you like this, if there were things I could improve, if there's other courses that you want us to make. And while I can't guarantee the time commitment I can put towards this, I'm doing my best to put out fully comprehensive coursework. So my hope ultimately is that boot camps are somewhat irrelevant. Like I think there's a good purpose and they definitely served a purpose while sales was kind of coming up as a broader profession that was gaining awareness in the broader marketplace. But in my opinion, we have the ability now to make very in-depth and thorough courses for free. So I'm trying to do that as best as I can and really appreciate the support in any way, shape, or form, whether that's you getting a job and helping other people in the future. If you do feel compelled to contribute in Patreon, that would be great. But at a minimum, just appreciate your time, appreciate you actually going through this. And I hope that you have a really great resume and LinkedIn and interview process and get a job that suits you well. And we will see you at a later date. So really appreciate it. Thanks.